growth requires more than capital.
Why do we call it the cheat code? Nobody said growth had to be fair.
Revenue solves everything.
Welcome to the cheat code. What was our fastest path to revenue?
We tend to like to do things the hard way.
What's the cheat code? It's giving yourself an unfair advantage over the others.
What is it that really works, and how are we going to grow these organizations?
That's our cheat code.
Hello, once again. You're on the cheat code, and I feel like we're on the back half of or on the back slide here. It's November, at least when we're taping this, and I'm joined once again by Josh, joining us from the arcade. Josh, what's up, man?
From the arcade, yeah. I ran out of quarters prior to the show, so unfortunately I wasn't able to play. Yeah, you're such a cheap ass that the arcade doesn't. It takes quarters.
Those balls of water don't pay for themselves over there, but. And this entire season has been marketing driven. I feel like we've got, certainly one of my favorite marketers on the show here today, and I'll just go ahead and hop into the intro and do his announce here. So Jason Miller is joining us. Jason and I got to know each other a long time ago. It feels like damn near 15 years, I think, when he was at Marketo. He's been at LinkedIn. He's been at ActiveCampaign. He's been at Type. And then most recently just joined a new org, which is Jigsaw, as their head of marketing. By no means is that a comprehensive intro for him whatsoever. The dude's rock and roll and concert photographer, and has a number of books out. He's got a recent book, which is Second Skin. So we can get into all of that, of course, on the podcast. But Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been Marketo days. They always come up because someone the other day said to me, they said, because I always talk about the Marketo days. So I thought that was really some of the best times in B2B. And someone said to me, they said, it's not really cool to be talking about the way things used to be. And I said, what if they were better? And that didn't go well. Anyway,
what if it was really
I think what I'm saying is happy to be here. So I think that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, and you're joining us from dreary old England today?
It's a beautiful, dreary, foggy, misty day. The kind of day where it's not supposed to rain, but it's just kind of spitting all day. And you can't get the umbrella. It's not worth bringing the umbrella. It's just a little depressing right now. But we had a good summer.
Yeah, we're like on opposite ends of the spectrum permanently, because Arizona, I was reading on the hurricane, and our other partner owns a couple properties in Georgia, and he's like, they got 29 inches in 24 hours. I was like, that's 29 years in Arizona.
Yeah, that's the whole.
We literally average an inch a year. So yeah, we're living very different lives. But
Sorry.
So I will hop right into it, because I know there's a ton of context around this, but the show's called The Cheat Code for a reason. So I'll open the door to that. Jason, what's your marketing cheat code?
Look, my marketing cheat code, it's shifted recently, but at its core, I think if you asked me what the only three things that I think work in B2B, and there's all the talk about the B2B playbook being dead, even from John Miller, Marketo, no relation. He's
got to sell software somehow. Come on.
But it's funny to see him and Phil from Marketo go back and forth on this death of the playbook. And anyway, my point is, my cheat code is there's three things that I think work, and three things I would focus on only. And I think that's brand, I think that's events, and I think community. And you could probably a dash of demand gen that supports all of that. But those three things are critical. And I will tell you this. The most interesting thing is the rise of brand. And I saw this kind of shift. My background's a little demand gen, a little content, social, whatever. But I shifted over to be a brand marketer because I saw all of this coming. And the way that I look at it on the importance of brand, I think you're seeing a lot. Everyone's talking about brand, right? And I think it's because of, if I had to put together my own little timeline, it would be, it used to be leads. And Justin, you were there for this, right? It was leads, gate everything, leads all day. We need more leads. We don't have enough leads. Then it went into big data. Oh, we don't have enough data. We need more data, big data. Everything's data. Then it went into, let's take a minute and go back to storytelling. Everyone's a storyteller. You got to be a storyteller. And then we figured out that no one gives a shit about any of this stuff unless they know who you are and they trust you. And then here comes the brand. So now everybody's racing to brand. And I call it branding strikes back because that's where we are. And I think if you put a commercial lens on it, I'm going to borrow this from my wife, Trisha, who I think she told me, and I use this in all my sessions and whatever talks or whatever, but she said, how do you sell? Well, I was asking, how do I convince the head of sales, that we need to focus more on brand. And she said, people don't buy from companies they don't trust, and they don't trust companies they've never heard of. And that's especially true in the UK. But I think it's becoming very clear as competition heats up, as the startup space continues to have multiple different options and shortlists are being built. I mean, it's the competition everywhere is crazy, right? And I think brand is that differentiator. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but brand.
The funny thing is, because we brought up Marketo, I'll mention it here. So that focus on demand gen and lead generation and nurturing and the whole nine, like it's funny because I was looking at, hey, what is the current agreed upon spend allotment between brand and demand? And largely everyone agrees it's like anywhere between 55 and 60% brand, and the reciprocal is demand and so on. And when you look at like what Marketo's message was back in the day, it was certainly like, hey, you are a demand center. That's what you need in order to get a seat at the revenue table. You need to be generating revenue and so on. But your point on sales made me think of this, because like the sellers at Marketo had a complete unfair advantage because everyone knew who they were when they were reaching out and doing their prospecting, because Marketo had built such a massive brand largely on the back of like, how is Marketo marketing? And so it's interesting. Like, I feel like the only organizations that don't give the credit to brand are the ones that just inherently are the recipients of the value of it. And so I guess let's take it back to the beginning though. Like I 1000% agree. The problem is it's really difficult to build a brand, right? Certainly within this competitive environment, especially when everyone's looking for, like, no one's spending on experiments anymore. They're spending on things that are going to make a drastic impact to their bottom line. And that's demonstrable. So where do you get started with, probably the most important pillar out of those three?
So it's interesting. I think if you look at the big brands, you could go back and take this 6 month to a year process of defining your story and your vision and your mission and all this. And I don't think we have time for that. I don't think startups have time for that. So what I do, what I recommend, the cheat code, is to just dive into the positioning and the core messaging, right? And it's funny because I got to hang out with April Dunsford, who wrote the Bible on positioning.
Yeah.
And she was over here for a conference. We were both speaking at this conference, Turing Fest, a couple of months ago. And I just kind of like I was able to we had dinner. And I was picking her brain, and I just said, I don't think people. It's not the cool, sexy thing to do, positioning and messaging, at the core. And I don't think people really take it seriously enough to nail that, because they look at copy. Well, they look at messaging as copy. Those are two very different things, right? Like, you start with messaging, and you get the core of that, and you get that agreed upon across the org, and then marketing turns that into outward-facing copy. And I think they're missing that. Sounds so small, but if you don't have the messaging right, then you can't get the copy right, and then the story is all over the place. So I think it starts with defining, obviously your ICP. Go down to their pain points, and it sounds so simple, but I can't tell you how many people still don't get it. They're trying to be too aspirational with their marketing. They're forgetting to solve the problems as quickly as humanly possible. And then I think you get that message and you get that value prop. You turn it into a short elevator pitch, and I think you can start to build the brand just from that core. And this is, like, I talk about this a lot, and people are talking about how AI is going to impact this, and I always say, let AI, do the grunt work and the personalization at the top of the funnel, expanding your audience, all that stuff, and then let it filter through at the bottom with follow-ups and translations and all this stuff. But protect the core. Don't let AI touch the core. Protect the core. The core of the brand is the value prop. It's the messaging. It's human written because it came from your founders and the people who are using your products, right? And I think we just kind of lost sight of that. And, back to, not to jump over the place, but you touched on something else that really pisses me off. And it just came up, like Trish just came back from a conference talking about this. And we go to these conferences now, and they'll put a brand up there, and they'll be talking like, oh, we did this, and we did this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, but you already have a built-in audience. Like, anything you're maintaining. You're not growing or building. There's nothing I can learn from you. And nothing against LinkedIn. Look, I love LinkedIn. I just did a little thing for them a couple weeks ago here in town. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without LinkedIn. Had a lot of fun there. Did lots of cool stuff. But, when I was at LinkedIn, no one gave a shit about LinkedIn. We had to scratch and claw for anybody to even pay attention to us. And now I think they're at a level, there's still some great people, they're doing some great work, but they have that audience to where anything that they do, Microsoft as well, anything they do will have a certain level of success based on the groundswell of work and who they are and the brand they built. And I think, trying to get inspiration from that as a startup where nobody knows who you are, it's misleading. It's frustrating. I think the real cool stuff is happening with the startups, but they're so goddamn busy that they can't shout about it 20 times a day on LinkedIn. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, I think that's why brand gets shit on so much in the startup world, right? Because it gets associated with Starbucks and Coke and Microsoft, to your point, right? Everyone thinks, oh God, brand, that's not for me, right? These are big monster conglomerate type of things. And well, so we've already reminisced about the Marketo days, so I'm going to do it again. When we were partners and I was with Justin at LeadMD, if you didn't know that, I felt like, you had to find the niche of where your brand is going to win. And, we invest in vertical SaaS. So it's all niche. So the brand has to be somewhat niche, right? And it has to be somewhat specific, if that even makes sense from a branding standpoint. So I remember Justin was the head of the snake, right? Like he did a good job of building his own personal brand, one within the Marketo ecosystem, and then two broader in B2B, which, like you said at the beginning of the show, you're one of our favorite people in B2B. I remember one day specifically, I come into the office and I was running sales at the time. He said, listen, I can't be the only one who's the face of this company. You need to do it too. And that didn't mean I needed to go out and be a B2B influencer. That meant I need to be a face of the brand within Marketo's walls, because those are the people that I sold to. I sold to the Marketo sellers. So I kind of had this brand. There was a time when people thought I was the CEO of LeadMD in Marketo's walls, only there, right? Like that's it. And I think that's the thing that founders kind of need to realize. They need to take a stake in what the brand is and who it is and kind of be the face of that niche, whatever that niche may be, and whoever it is they're selling to. Does that kind of make sense, or am I going completely crazy?
No, it's great. And I think, it used to be everybody said, oh, you can't be too niche. Now, like the more niche you are, I think the more creative you can be, I think the easier it is, to be quite frank. Your audience is smaller. You can track them better. You can make connections better. You can really tap into it, focus your messaging. But, the other side to that is you make a really good point about the CEOs and anybody just being the face of the company, but leaning into it as part of the brand. But I see them fall into this trap where, like, they get one negative comment or one nasty comment and they just shut down. And the last company I was at, startup, the founder, when I was interviewing with him, he said, "We're not afraid to piss off half of the audience, because we're not going to make everyone happy, but we need to put our opinions out there. We need to show this is the way that we think this should be done based on our expertise." And I think people talk a lot of big game, but when it comes to it, I think people get up to the plate. And there's a big swing opportunity, and they buckle down, play it safe, and I think it just keeps happening again and again and again and again. So yeah, it's about opinions. It's about having something to say, and I think that's completely missed out.
Oh, I think that's the critical point. So just to kind of take this down to the tactic level, because I agree, like startups, everything that you said in terms of messaging and content and so on, like they jump to the output because it's tangible. They're looking to move and so on, but I think what you need from certainly your key individuals in the organization, and hopefully everyone in the company, like to be a brand ambassador, I think first and foremost, you have to be curious. You need tentacles out into the market that are going to help you inform that point of view, that unique point of view. The more innovative that it can be, the more, disruptive in terms of incumbent and competitive solutions, that positions your solution, like we've talked about, like within a tightly defined ICP. You need that feedback, and I always go to the, I think I've brought this up on this podcast before, but like I always go to the Snowflake story. Like I saw their CRO speak one of Craig's events it's almost a year ago now. But, for the first year, all he did was go around and talk to folks, organizations that they believed were their ICP. And that then informed not only the product, but their, unique point of view. And then that brand was really born from that research. I feel like the more you can get, different folks engaging at different levels within organizations, different types of folks within the vertical, that allows you to really harden and make that point of view defensible and bulletproof. And to your point, like it's going to alienate some people. but it's going to attract the people that you're aiming at. And you can't be afraid to put that message out there. But I feel like that's why a lot of people immediately retreat. They don't have the confidence in that point of view. It's just almost something that was generated in a back room, and they come out and say, all right, this is what we're going with. And the minute it gets in friction, it's like, whoa, maybe that's not it. Like if you've really been informed by the folks that are part of your culture and are essentially that company, and that they're informed by the market, I feel like that's the winning combination there. So like I'm curious, like what's your take on point of view? We had a dude named Pablo on the show a while back, which strangely he's not in like B2B tech, but he's adopted like all of these B2B philosophies and so on, and then really innovated on them. And his big thing is point of view. Like you need to be putting a point of view out there in the organization in order to build another one of your main points, which is community, and really having that as a centerpiece there. So do you find that's kind of a thread between essentially all three of those core pillars?
I do, and I think there's a fine line between confidence and ego. And I think when you bleed over into ego, when you move into the ego space, I think it comes out, and that's what scares people. But I think if you can walk that fine line and but back up with your expertise, because you did your research, because you've been in the trenches, because you've done it before. I mean, how many people do we see out there on LinkedIn talking about, oh, I booked 87 meetings last week and blah blah blah? That's like or sort of the philosophical B2B marketer who's telling you what to do, but they've never actually done it themselves. That's kind of, no one's calling them out. All they're doing is just saying congratulations and kind of egging them on. And I think it gives them more confidence to do the wrong thing. And I think the other thing I think people, and obviously LinkedIn is the place, everyone needs to have this opinion, but you don't have to, write a big, broetry post or whatever they're calling, the text-based post or do the video. Like you could just, I've commented, like if you just comment on a couple things with your opinion, that actually gets more traction than some of the posts, the individual posts. So I think people take it for granted. They're always trying to muster up the next perfect post that's going to go viral for all the wrong reasons, instead of just going through, to your point, Justin, and researching and learning and taking opinions and pushing back and calling people out, not being a jerk about it. There's this whole rise of the contrarian marketing jerk that I think is being celebrated right now. And I think people are, it's a little bit of Trumpism, I think, blowing into just say whatever's on your mind to get the reaction and go viral, instead of just, a thoughtful comment or a thoughtful question on someone's perspective. It's all over the place. But, the thing that ties it all together, and I got a quote that I wrote down from John Miller. I still quote John. I love John Miller, right? He's like the classic quote around how do you define a brand, I think was the Jeff Bezos one. It's like, what the brand is what people say when you're not in the room.
Not in the room.
And
yep.
John said something a little bit different, and he said the brand is the sum of all the interactions the customer has with your company. And I think that's the new definition. And to your point, all those ambassadors, everyone in the org, that every single touch point, is it customer service? Is it follow-up? Is it outreach? Is it being an event? Is it an email? Every one of those touch points make up your brand, not just like what the hearsay is when you're not in the room or whatever. I think it's very outdated. So that's the common thread. But yeah, it's all, how do you make some noise very quickly instead of going the traditional route? You have a strong opinion, you can back it up, and you put it out there in a confident manner.
That's defensible and to the point, like it's backed up by experience. And that experience is like just telling authentic stories. Like no one expects everything to work every time, but I think they do expect there to be learnings from those that you're then translating into things that can help them. And I'm so tempted to go down the rabbit hole here on like what I wish LinkedIn would have evolved into, but I'm going to hold my tongue. So we talked about brand. Can we actually hop to community next? Because I feel like that is something that's another one of those superficial, almost tactics that people embrace. And I feel like they try to do this really poorly. And normally it comes initially in the sense of like, we're going to put out a big conference once a year. And most often you see those things not get critical mass. But the orgs that do, really succeed in building a true community that exists both in person, online these days, obviously, that really proliferates without them having to kind of, constantly feed that community are what I would think of as the success stories there. So similar question as my first, like how do you see folks thinking about that and starting to execute towards that ultimate vision?
I think there's this preconceived notion that community means massive, massive audience of folks who are dedicated to a specific conversation or topic, and I think that might have been true many years ago, but now I think it's so open to interpretation, right? So even the small groups that I get together with, the private groups of 5-6 B2B marketing leaders that we go have lunch or whatever. I think that's community, right? I think internal
that's the ones that I hear about most, quite frankly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Someone will be like, "Oh, I'm in the CMO meetup." Matt Hyden does a great job of this. I think it's still on Fridays, like where they'll get together digitally and like they're having real interactions, conversations. People are walking away saying like, "I learned something in every single one of those interactions." And it doesn't have to your point. It's smaller in nature because it's bespoke and people feel like they have trust there. They can share in that area. And it's not that, I feel like with size that degrades quite a bit.
It's a really great point. By the way, I can't get into that because I'm not a CMO. I apply. like Matt. I don't think I didn't reach out to Matt. I didn't go there. But anyway, but you're right. Like and you can see the difference plain as day. Every day you see it on LinkedIn. If you see somebody ask a question on LinkedIn, everyone's either trying to sell them or one-up them. If you ask a question in a smaller community, you get 100 people genuinely trying to help you. And I think it's because it's out in the public for everyone to see, and you can't be vulnerable for God forbid, or you can't show that you don't know the answer to something, or that you're taking advice from somebody who's more junior than you are. But in a tight-knit, well-run community, none of that shit matters, right? You're learning, and you're excited to help people. I think on LinkedIn, it's like the high school hall where you're just trying to be the cool kid. And
just
you can't
posturing.
show that you're vulnerable. Or if you do show that you're vulnerable, you go completely the other route, like the crying CMO or whatever. And it's like, man, where's the balance? Like,
well, I bet that could be an entire podcast in itself. Where's the balance?
But I do think, there's a couple of communities that I'm in. It is time consuming, but if I have a question, I'm for sure is not going to go to LinkedIn. There's no way in hell I'd ever go to LinkedIn and post it. But what I would do is I would go to my trusted community of 20, 30 people, or even like a bigger community. There's a couple that are around there. I think we all know the kind of the top ones. Several thousand people, but it's monitored. They are there to help, and they're generally learning and growing together. And I don't think you see that in the Wild West of LinkedIn, unfortunately.
And so how do you curate that? You know what I mean? Like those communities all started somewhere. I'm an organization. Again, I do think like brand and a point of view are precursors to this, right? Like people aren't just going to show up if it's another thing to do. I doubt any of us need another thing to do. So like what are kind of those necessary ingredients, and how do you get started?
Well, I hate to quote John Miller again. I think I'm a John Miller fanboy.
No, wait a minute. What did you dress up as for Halloween, Jace?
John Miller. But another quote, just because I use so many quotes at Marketo and all my presentations, I kind of took them with me because they work. John said before I wrote my first line of code, I wrote my first blog post. And I'm not saying blog is the way to do this, but like to your point, they built the audience and they shipped the product over based on the feedback they got. That was community building. Like people think community has to be built in. They have to be like in a hub somewhere, and you have to feed this community constantly. It's not necessarily the point. But if you're going to start from scratch, I think this is where it gets tricky, because you have to take a risk, because you could fail, right? Mm-hmm. But the way that I've seen it happen is you start a newsletter on LinkedIn, or start your own newsletter, get people to subscribe, get that subscriber list up, tease out the fact that you're going to do a small invite-only community, put the wait list out there, see if you can get that wait list up to 30, 40, 50 people that are going to show up and commit, get them to commit. And you got to start somewhere, and it's tough, man. It's really tough to get people to do anything outside of their normal day, because I think we're all so stressed and busy and so many things to worry about these days. But it doesn't have to be massive. You don't need thousands of people, but you need to find your tribe. I guess what Seth Godin said 10, 15 years ago: find your tribe, and then just give them a place to have conversations and hash it out. And again, I don't think it's about feeding that community. I think it's about giving them building up proving that the conversation that you're having, the opinion you're having, is got enough behind it to foster something even sparking. And then you got to take the leap of faith and you got to launch it, and then you got to see what the reaction is, get a couple of people hopefully to help you out. But, that's the thing. I think people start their newsletters. They start their newsletters on LinkedIn. They start their newsletters through MailChimp or whatever, and they get to a certain place. And I think that they're afraid that they'll launch this community, no one will come, or it takes too long. I don't know. But that's how it's if you're starting from scratch with nothing. Now, the other flip side of that is, how do you carve out, most of these startups have those communities built in as a support network, and they're only using them for support. How do you weave in your opinions and your thought leadership into, I hate to use the word thought leadership, but that's what it is, right? And how do you weave that in? How do you take the offline, the events and everything, and bring the conversation not to a landing page, but into a community? And chances are, if you're a startup, a SaaS product, you have that community. It's probably driven by support tickets, and there's probably a very limited conversation. How do you spark that? You bring offline, you bring your marketing, you bring a concerted effort in to drive people to that point. And it ain't easy, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it's consistency, it's sticking with it, and it's literally finding your tribe and bringing them into a place and giving them some sort of value. And I think if you sell as the point of, you can learn here, you can share here, it's a trusted space, I think people will respond. I really, really do.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ingredients that are required in order for that to happen, even at a niche level. A prerequisite of experience, right? You have some level of experience that you can fall back on. And through that experience, you've created a point of view that is, we've talked about this in branding, right? That it's interesting. It's something that people care about. And then the third, I think, is just a spirit of, let's call it mentorship, right? You're willing to give freely without any expectation of a return. I feel like if those three pillars aren't there, there's no way, you kind of talked about the tactical, get a newsletter, build an audience, this and that, but how can you build anything without those three pillars? And what are your thoughts?
It's funny, because you said something that sent me off on a rant a little while ago. I saw someone had a coffee mug, and it said something around like, yeah, you can pick my brain for and I'll invoice you $1,000 or whatever. I'm like, fuck happened to people just being nice? I mean, I used to be I can't tell you how many people I've reached out to and just said, I didn't say, can I pick your brain? But I said, hey, can I interview you for something? Or I just have a question. And they were, God forbid, they answered me and helped me. Seth Godin replied to an email about a question I had, and now the entitlement around, I can't even give you 5 minutes of my time without, the invoice, or making a joke about it. It really makes me crazy that people are so defensive, or I don't know what the problem is, but they just can't spare 10 minutes to help somebody out or answer a question based on their experience. And if you if you can't do that, then you certainly shouldn't be trying to start a community.
Right.
But I'll tell you, I'll be honest. I when I get invited to these dinners, these whatever B2B dinners or C-suite dinners, I always go to them because I like being around marketers. Now, it's not the marketing, it's not the table of marketers I would necessarily pick, but I will tell you that if someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're getting beers with B2B marketers next week," I would be there. No one does this. No one fucking does this. And it's you don't have to put a newsletter, build a newsletter, or even have a strong opinion per se. You just need a place to host it or someone to pull them together. But I just think even getting 5 smart B2B marketers together in one city, and then growing from there, and then building that out, and then taking that online. I think that I would love to be able to get 5 to 10 B2B marketers together in London once a month for beers or dinner or something, just so we can vent and talk about marketing malpractice.
Beers help.
Malpractice. Well, it's interesting. The thing I always say here is I'm always just completely surprised at the generosity of folks' time and my advice to college students, people graduating that want to God forbid. I know you taught marketing at the as an adjunct professor, I believe, for a while at UC. God forbid, though, that at most schools you go to school for marketing and then try to get a job in marketing. You need some sort of a bridge there. And so I feel I always coach people, reach out. Like people will, you'd be surprised at how much, or the propensity for people to say yes. But I'm almost starting to see like this new wave happen where that's changing. And I don't know if that's COVID. I don't know if that's just a different generation coming up and so on, but I've seen much more of what you're talking about, specifically along the lines of like, not folks that have like sold companies and launched, huge brands, but more on like the next generation of those folks, like the folks that just got into a CMO seat or a CRO seat, and that's just completely depressing to me, quite frankly. Like, I think, I'm a big proponent of saying yes. Like Kristen, who helps us produce this podcast, has sent me to some fucking god awful areas of the United States where I've spoke before, because I'm a big proponent of saying yes. And I still think there's value that comes out of all that stuff. And so I think, my caveat to this would be like, take advantage of it while it's still, for the most part, the norm, where people will get together. And to your point, I think there could be a lot more, kind of shots out there at getting people together and starting to form these communities. And frankly, Josh, as Jason was talking, I was thinking like, wow, we just did this, with the launch of this business and the build of our LP base. I mean, we started from literally zero, and really used the feedback from those folks on like, yeah, of course we want them to invest and so on, but like, why are they coming to us? What are they looking for? And so we have like a lot of non-traditional venture investors, folks that are in real estate and later stage private equity and just equities in general. And they want to know what that next thing is. And so like, even when we get LPs together, which we do at least twice a year in person, that's always the question. Like, what are you seeing out there? AI is always a big topic, of course, but just like, they're curious about technology. And that community has kind of been formed around like, hey, we can share that information with them, and they're a receptive audience to it. And so I again, and this is more for the audience, but like that get, and that just that curiosity, like your community will tell you what they want from you or what they need from you. And if you build in line with that opportunity and that product market fit, essentially, I feel like that's the recipe for keeping these things going as well.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, sorry, Josh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, there's that sense of just bringing interesting folks together, which I think you both are saying, right? Like in our LP, soirees, we'll call them, or mixers, like there's all these cross sections of ages and professions, if we want to call it, what they invest in, and they're all kind of, oh, that's interesting. Hey, can you connect me with so and so? I didn't get his phone number, right? Like just that kind of organic, interesting people doing interesting things, getting together, and I think that crosses all, we'll call it marketing, sales, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Just, I mean, marketing is so hard right now, and like literally, like hardly anything's working. And I think just talking to someone else and knowing that nothing's working for them isn't.
Hey, that's not trying to me.
Yeah, and just trying to figure it out. I mean, just knowing I tried something, it didn't work. It was a complete failure. Like sharing those, but just relating. I think a little empathy. Just relating stories of I tried this and getting their feedback, because I think sometimes we're like these days, marketers are wearing so many different hats across the different disciplines. They might be missing a trick from someone who's been down that road, as an expert space. So yeah, there's so much value in there. But again, we're also goddamn busy. We're also worried about things, and I think the biggest thing is that no one wants to take the leap because they're afraid.
Yeah.
That no one will show up either online or even in person. No one cares. So I don't know.
All right. So we've got brand, we've got community, the third leg of the stool, events. Which has, I saw a post this morning because what is now marketingoperations.com, Mike Rizzo and those guys just put on their Mopsapalooza, which great title. And, a lot of people were like, oh, this is my first event in 5 years, first event in 9 years. Like, I was like, Jesus. So, like, I feel like there is a bit of a spring for events and so on. So, yeah, say more about that.
Yeah, I think it's about just, I think before COVID, I fear that we just show up at events, we just scan a bunch of badges and we go home and call it success. Mm-hmm. Now I think it's about how do you do more? How do you document the conversations and the context in the moment, focus more on quality over quantity, and bring that home and really do something with it. And I think again, I think the demand gen campaign, the email campaign that we used to do with the sequences, I think all that's kind of out the door right now in terms of cold emailing or even to a warm list per se. But I think it all starts from events, and those events are the hubs and the themes and what you bring home. Sure, you can have a big, scan 1,000 people, but how do you tier those out and focus on the conversations you actually had? How do you put together a list of target folks that you want to, that you obviously want to get to and meet and have drinks or coffee with? How do you focus on a full pre, during, post event process? People just rock up with their booth and they forget that they could have been doing a targeted LinkedIn campaign or something more specific to warm these folks up or to generate some interest. So I just think events for me are the most exciting thing because I think it's the space where we used to be able to get really creative with our marketing campaigns across different channels. Now I think you can get really creative with your marketing campaigns before, during, in person, and then the follow-ups. And I think I just don't think there's any better way to make an impact quickly and get to that target audience than events right now. And again, I think you start. My advice, if you have a little bit of budget, carve out some budget. We've even called up like conferences and said, "Yeah, we don't have a lot of money. We're a startup, and like, what can you do for us?" You don't buy a standard sponsorship package if you don't have to, but just find a creative way to get your foot in the door and make the most out of it. And I think events are just super interesting and creative right now.
Or should be, right? Like I think, all marketing goes in cycles, and, when digital got huge and all of a sudden what you see? You saw print and mail have a resurgence because no one was used to getting anything in the mail of substance anymore. And the same thing, if there's a positive to COVID, I think it's certainly the fact that the reset button has been hit on events. To your point, like, let's not go back and put on the same boring ass shit that, 85-90% of folks were doing pre-COVID. There's kind of a clean slate there. And so, like, how do you reinvent and redefine what that event can be? And I do think there are some examples of folks out there that are both like industry conferences as well as like, more kind of user or community based that are doing great things around events. Like Arcadia is one that Josh went to a while back, and they were out in the middle of, rural Montana in teepee, glamping teepees, if you will, but like, it's a bunch of folks an excuse to go camping, and it kind of had an inherent value in itself. And I see people doing the same types of stuff that you're talking about, like with partners, like, hey, how do I get in to that number one partner? If they're holding a big user conference, like, let's just call them up and figure out something pragmatic. So I'd say like the key there is throwing out the old playbook, because the old, like, oh, I sent the invite email and then the reminder and, oh, thanks for, stopping by our booth or attending or whatever, like, it just doesn't cut it. And if you're not taking advantage of this, I would agree, like, you're leaving a massive opportunity on the table, which will not be an opportunity forever. Like, these things are go in cycles again.
Well, I think, back in the Marketo days, we inherited this massive database. So I think a lot of companies used to inherit these massive email lists or databases to work from. But now a lot of startups start from scratch. They literally have nothing. I think that's where you just go in for the kill with the events. And it builds it, and I think, once you get some traction, then you can, get some success, and you figure out how to run an event at someone else's event, and you do your little road show and keep it small. And again, there's another thing where I think people are just afraid to pull a trigger because they're afraid no one's going to show up or this or that. I don't know. But I saw something on LinkedIn. This woman, very smart. I forgot her name, but she's a very smart, clever marketer I've been following. And she was at maybe it was Content Marketing World or something. But she had a backpack. Did you guys see this? She had a backpack that had like a big LED billboard on it, and she.
No, but I've seen someone do that.
Oh, that
before.
guy. What's that guy's name?
Oh, geez.
Data Spring or Data Plant or something?
Yeah. We should put that in the show notes, because this dude showed up at an event. And what was the event? It was a private equity event. Private equity event that we went to. Yeah. And this guy was just broadcasting, like, hey, this is what we do. Kind of had their stats, like, 40% month over month, 120% year over year, like, like an advertisement for getting funding for his startup. It was awesome.
And it's funny because, like, I don't think it works for everyone, right? But it's that kind of thinking. It's like at no budget. It's very creative, and we're talking about it, and it made some noise. People paid attention. I think there used to be like I think in Marketo they used to dress somebody up in like a purple bodysuit. and run them through the conference. Like
Yep.
it was like George Costanza running across the field in bodysuit man. But these, I mean, this is what we used to do back in the day.
Yeah.
We used to think about crazy fun shit like this that no one else would even think about doing, and all of a sudden we've all shut down, and now we're just trying to measure everything. And yeah, I don't know.
I'm still paying for a storage unit where I've got a massive flying pig costume
Flying pig.
from old Lead MD booth days.
Well, Kester's told us some stories about hacking sales Dreamforce at the early days of Sales Loft, taking a dollar bill gun and just shooting dollar bills that had Salesforce logos or Sales Loft, logos all over them into the crowd of people at Dreamforce.
Yeah, we had fire jugglers outside of Dreamforce as well. Like, yeah, I mean, you can do some creative stuff. Like, I think what's now Outreach, which used to be Sales Hacker. They rented an apartment off Airbnb. Instead of having a booth space, like you can get, it's a license to do off the wall stuff that chances are people are going to be talking about a decade later.
Yeah, I just like the fact that you can just get in the room and just think of a bunch of crazy ideas, and usually the craziest one is the worst idea, but that's usually the one that turns out to be the one you do.
Yeah, you just got to have a CEO that's willing to take a little bit of risk, or just don't tell them until after it's done.
Yeah, it's just funny to me. Like, out of all the things that used to work, that we used to, the bread and butter of B2B, I mean, I just think they all still work, but you have to shift the approach. And I think like events, brand, community, all those things that we used to do, they still work. You just have to apply them in a different way. And then don't get me started on the AI thing. That's just another fucking mess. But
Awesome. Well, that's a good place for us to wrap up. Jason, I very much appreciate your time. I know what time is it there?
It is 5:49. My kid's
All
taking
right.
a bath.
Yeah, I will let you get off the podcast, certainly. Before you do that, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but you've got a book out. Like, you do a ton of awesome photography. If Josh pivots the camera in the other room, I've got your Smashing Pumpkins and Soundgarden photos up on my wall out there, and I thank you very much. But where can people go to check out other cool shit that you're into?
So rock and roll cocktail, rock and roll, like pork and beans. Rock and roll cocktail.com is my little hub where you can sign up for my newsletter, and I do it much more frequently now. But it's a little bit of marketing, a little bit of content, just opinions and stuff. And then Instagram and TikTok is where I spend a lot of time these days. Obviously LinkedIn. But send me a note if you want to connect and just say you heard me here on the podcast.
Yeah, or if you want to put together a beer and steak event in London. I mean, he's open.
I'm always open, and I love. And if you want to, if I have time, I can't say not that I provide any value to anybody anymore, but if someone had a question for me, I will respond and I will help you out if I have time. Clearly, because that's how I got here today. And I hope everyone else stops bitching about people asking to pick their brains and charging them for it. Anyway, boy, man, let's turn it into a rant.
Invoice paid.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, the book is called Second Skin. Digital version is coming out soon. We just did the paperback. It's a special place in my heart. It's called It's a bizwire, which I stole I coined that term from my friend JJ French from Twisted Sister. I'm totally name dropping. I've got some great stories about JJ French coming by the LinkedIn office, though. He's come by all the time.
Awesome.
It's half business, half memoir. Lots of crazy stories, lots of fun stuff in the music business, into LinkedIn, and some crazy anecdotes and some life lessons learned for today. So that's my baby right now. So
yeah, if you don't have it, check it out. It's an awesome read. Jason, thank you so much for your time. Great cheat code and even greater anecdotes and stories. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And if you're just tuning in for the first time, for God's sake, subscribe to the damn podcast. And certainly, I got to drop a plug for our own book, which hits shelves January 15th, the go-to-market cheat code. A lot of stories like this, building partnerships, building partner-led go-to-market. Pre-order it. We're ending the bestseller with this baby. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode, and we will see you next time.